You know, Morbius and Madam Web were both terrible movies, but at least Morbius had that meme going for it, and Madam Web, well, Madam Web is Madam Web, you can call it anything you want, but you can't call it boring.
He was in the Amazon with my mom when she was researching spiders right before she died.
They were bad movies, but they were the messy, baffling kind of bad movies, like a dumpster fire you can't look away from. The kind of bad movies you can watch with your friends and make fun of. The kind of bad movies you can put on and enjoy if maybe some alcohol is involved. Kraven the Hunter, though, is not that. This is Witch Alice and welcome to another video. Kraven the Hunter is the latest addition to Sony's Spider-Man universe. And side note, I just found out just now as I was making this video that Sony decided to call this universe the Sony's Spider-Man universe, and I just think that that's funny. Calling your universe, your film franchise, the Sony's Spider-Man universe, and never having a single Spider-Man film actually in it. I know they're all Spider-Man comics characters, and I know that Sony technically, legally owns Tom Holland's Spider-Man right now. But did anyone ever really believe that he would appear in any of these? Cause this is Sony's Spider-Man universe, but no, we don't have any Spider-Man movies. We have his villains. Anyway, please be warned, there will be spoilers. Kraven the Hunter is about a guy named Sergey who gets animal-like powers. Think lions, jaguars, and eagles. He's of the wild. That's like his theme. He runs fast like wild animals, he has enhanced bird-like vision, he's strong, and he decides to use these powers for good, which has lots of consequences for him given the fact that he comes from a crime family. His dad is this big-time crime boss, so you know, hilarity ensues. To the movie's credit, thematically speaking, Kraven's relationship with his family is one of its more interesting aspects. It's not very interesting, but in the middle of so much nothing, it's at least something. But we'll talk more about that later. For now, let's start with the bad. And that is, first of all, of course, that this movie is so boring. The first act of this movie shows how he got his powers, and it's a basic, by-the-numbers, boring origin story. And it's so drawn out and ineffective at making you feel anything for the character. It's supposed to be this giant traumatic event for Kraven. It's what changed him forever, that transformed him as a person, that turned him into Kraven the Hunter. But you never feel the intensity of that. It just happens. Compare the first act of this movie to the first act of the first Iron Man. That was an origin story too of how Tony Stark got his suit, except it was done in a way that wasn't boring. After Tony Stark came out of that cave, you knew that he was a different man. In this movie, after Kraven gets mauled by a lion, dies, and gets brought back to life, he says he's changed, but you don't feel it. Another huge part of the reason why this movie's so unengaging too comes from the fact that I never felt that Kraven was in any danger at any point in the movie. The threats, the stakes, they all just fell so flat. And that's one thing, right? If you're making a superhero movie, it's hard to make the audience believe that something bad can actually happen to your hero. Because they're the hero. Of course nothing bad's gonna happen to them. Of course they're not gonna die. They're the superhero. So I think that this movie actually made the right choice to make Kraven love his brother so much and make it so that it's his brother's life that's in danger. Kraven's brother is human and vulnerable for most of this movie, and it's his life that's at stake. He gets kidnapped 2/3 into the movie, and it's the first time you feel like something's happening. It's not much. Again, it's not much, but at least it's something. And conceptually, that's a good choice. As we keep saying in writing, the smaller the stakes are, the easier it is for the audience to understand them and care about them. If the stakes are always about the hero saving the world, it's harder for the audience to care about that because the world is such a huge, giant, abstract concept. Psychologically speaking, if I tell you 6 billion people are gonna die, it's hard to elicit an emotional response because it's hard for humans to understand the intensity of 6 billion as a number. But if I tell you that I'm gonna die, it's easier to elicit an emotional response because 1 is easier to understand than 6 billion. So it was a good idea to make the whole movie about saving his brother. It still fell flat in execution though. Conceptually it was good, execution-wise, no. I liked Kraven's relationship with his brother, but the movie barely puts in any work at all to make you feel like that brother's life is in any real danger. There's a point in this movie where the bad guys cut off the brother's finger, but they don't show that scene. That scene would have done a lot of good work to make the threat to his life believable. I wanted to see the finger cutting scene. That makes me sound like a psychopath, but you know, it would have been really effective. The action, too, is so bland and benign, which is so weird for an R-rated film. I actually forgot that this was rated R until the third act of the movie, where it just randomly upped the violence and the gore, and Kraven was all of a sudden killing all these men in these gruesome ways. And that was almost fun, you know? He was using bear traps and spikes and smashing them and ripping them apart. But it didn't last that long. And it happens in the third act. It was too little, too late. Where was that energy for the rest of the movie? The dialogue is also piss poor. There's a part in this movie where a lady is talking about herself and she literally says, "Now I work in one of the best detective law firms in all of Europe." And then Kraven is like, "I heard you were one of the best detective lawyers there." It's like, it's full of that. It's full of these unrealistic, descriptive, terrible lines. These are terrible lines, right? But they're not lines that are terrible enough to make the movie fun. They just stink, is what I'm saying. And besides the terrible dialogue, there is also the terrible, terrible acting. And this is not pointed to any of the performers at all, because one, I've seen these performers in other movies. I know that they're capable. I know they're capable actors. And two, it would have been one thing if there was one bad performance in this movie, if there was one bad actor that stood out. But no, all of them, like, suck acting wise. And so that's not the actor's fault. That's probably the director. That's on him. What the heck was going on with the acting for this one? That being said, there are things that I can appreciate about this movie. But before I talk about that, I just want to say, if you're still enjoying this video, please consider leaving a like or a comment. I am a small, tiny channel, and that would help me out a lot. Thank you. Maybe even subscribe. Anyway, things I can appreciate in Kraven. 1. Aaron Taylor Johnson's physicality. Not only does he look like a beast in this movie, but he moves like a beast too. His physicality as Kraven brought such a grounded strength and a feral quality to the character. I wish he got better action sequences because he looked really good in them. 2. Thematically, I respect that it attempted to discuss toxic masculinity. Kraven's dad was all about being strong and being cold and never showing weakness and never showing emotion. Despite that meaning potentially having his son killed, he was all about what it means to project power and be seen as powerful. Ugh. To him, being mean and evil was what strength is. So I'm glad that with Kraven, we have a hero who openly rejected that. Kraven's motivation in this movie is his love for his mom and his love for his brother, and I think that's neat. 3, I like that Kraven was anti-poaching. That was cool. What can I say? I love that made it into the movie. I like that he wasn't against hunting because he was explicitly hunting animals to eat them as food, but he's just against killing animals for no good reason. I like that he has some kind of code. 4, again, I like that Kraven actually cared for his brother, and I think their relationship was actually the most interesting part of the movie. They were able to make Kraven badass and strong and still also a loving and caring brother. I love that. I think it's also very funny that despite being a Spider-Man supervillain, if you watch this movie, Kraven has 0 villainous traits in him. He has nothing but good intentions. He's killing criminals and protecting his family and stopping poachers. He does nothing that makes him incredibly morally questionable. Venom at least ate people to stay alive, and that was kind of dark. But Kraven is just a noble guy. He kills criminals, sure, but you know, in today's media, that's kind of a norm for a lot of heroes. And I'm fine with that. I'm not mad about that. I just think it's funny, because like, what was the plan here, Sony? How is this version of Kraven the Hunter, who, from this movie, seems like a really noble guy, how is he ever going to fight Spider-Man? Become Spider-Man's supervillain? Is Spider-Man going to start poaching? Is he gonna start a gang? Well, actually, now that I think about it, Spider-Man could kill Kraven's brother. And yeah, that could work. That could be why Kraven becomes Spider-Man's supervillain. Yeah, all right. If Spider-Man accidentally kills Kraven's brother, yeah, I guess Kraven, yeah. But I guess that doesn't even matter now, because apparently Kraven is potentially the last addition to this franchise. Sony announced just before the release of this movie that it would be the last one for now. I don't know why you would do that. I don't know why you would make that announcement just before your movie releases, especially when one of its draws is the fact that it's part of a larger universe to tell us that that universe is over now, actually. Well, that's what? I don't mind it personally, but speaking business, did they not see how badly the end of the DCEU and the announcement of James Gunn's DCU badly affected the box office for Aquaman and Blue Beetle? What a weird statement. What? Why? Another one that I at least enjoyed in this movie was the brother becoming evil. I like that, but that happens at the end as a sequel hook, and there's not going to be a sequel, is there? So it doesn't even matter. Anyway, Kraven the Hunter. What a damp end to the silly franchise. Again, Venom and Madam Web were bad, but at least they were fun. I don't know about Morbius, but this franchise was insane and it was wacky and unhinged. It's not a shame that it's ending. It deserves to end, I think. But I do think it's a shame that it's ending with such a dry slog of a movie. If they ended with Madam Web, that would have been a great bang. But it ended with this. And this is just flat. It's not even bad enough to be fun. What about you? What did you think of Kraven the Hunter? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Was it as boring for you as it was for me? Please tell me in the comments down below. I would like to know. That's it for me. I'm out.